good to see you today. We welcome all of you. We do have guests in our audience. Thank you for being a part of our assembly this morning. We have announced several times already concerning the teacher seminar that will be held at Cameron Avenue. October the 18th will be a Saturday seminar. Tommy South, Tom Norville, and I will be participating, and we'll be presenting 6 messages on the role of the teacher, the place of effective Bible teaching. We'd like to encourage you, as Melvin announced a moment ago, to be a part of it. During the process of preparing for that, I thought how over the years that I've said so very little about the place and the importance of the Bible classes and Sunday morning participation, Wednesday night, vacation Bible school, Bible bowls, and a lot of other activities like that under various names, whereby we give as many opportunities as possible for both young and old alike to participate in Bible studies and in Bible classes. However, in the process of thinking about that, the role and the importance of it, I wondered why we had not said so very much about an apology for it, a justification for it, the biblical background for the place for such a very simple activity as that. You may think, well, it was unnecessary, so plain and so obvious, why would we spend time talking about that? It has not been so plain and obvious to all, and also, in addition to that, we have had not complete participation in it. In fact, very weak participation indeed. And I want, by the process of this message today, to once again highlight the role and the importance of these Bible classes and to urge all who are part of the church to participate as fully as possible. I also wanted the process to make it as clear as possible that we stand against any of the arguments made that would oppose the value and the place of simply meeting to study the Bible. First of all, just this brief historical sketch. Most of us have been so acquainted with the Sunday school, as we call it in the churches, the Bible classes, that it is so very common a part of the church to us. We know its place, we participated in it, we have great acquaintance with it. It is one of the most valuable, one of the most well-known institutions of Christian education among us in our history, both in Europe and in America. It seems such a normal part of our lives that for most people we've grown up participating in it and we've just not given very much thought to it. Perhaps we thought in our minds that it's always been a part of the church. It has always existed. But that really is not the case. In fact, Sunday schools, as we now know them, are relatively new, at least in the form in which we have them today. The Sunday school traces its origin back to just the late 18th century in Europe. At this time, the Europeans, as well as the Americans, were going through a tremendous revolution, a change from an agricultural society into the Industrial Revolution. Many were finding their fortunes because of the revolution, the Industrial Revolution. The gap, therefore, between the rich and the poor got greater, and those on the lower economic ladder were being left behind and were being used, in many cases, by the wealthy to further their wealth. There were sweatshops throughout both America and Europe where children worked for many times as up to 12 hours a day for 6 days a week. And so the only free day that even these young children had, not even going to public schools, if you'll also remember that that is of recent origin as well, that the only day they had free was Sunday. And on Sunday, because of the Sunday laws, therefore they basically ran open in the streets. Children, unsupervised. One writer says they were uncontrolled and uncontrollable in Europe at this time. And there was a cycle of poverty, crime, and prison that was just continued and perpetuated because of the children not being taught and not being able to read and to write. It was at this time in Gloucester, Robert Raikes arose among them and saw this disturbing problem among the children. His lifespan was from 1736 to 1811. And Mr. Raikes, both his grandparents, his grandfathers, were ministers, Richard Drew and Timothy Raikes, and therefore he had this religious upbringing and background. His father was a newspaper publisher. He grew up in the environment of that publishing setting, and he too became an editor and championed the cause of the poor. He would often visit prisons and to see young children there and others who had gotten into crime, because they were let run and without education, without much hope for them in the future. And therefore he began to promote things to help them get out of that cycle of poverty, illiteracy, and prison. And he looked with a great deal of compassion upon those around him in that day. One that he solicited help from, who aided him greatly in this effort, was a man named Thomas Stork. And these two sought to deal with this increasing problem. And so it was because of these two that they began to emphasize the need for doing something to stop this moral degeneration and this illiteracy among the young in that day. But there was a law in Europe, and we recently ran across it because in the Cayman Islands we sought to have classes where we taught children how to read on Saturday. And there was a law that up to 1779 called the Enabling Act, that it was not permitted for anyone to have a school, even on a very small basis, to instruct people in reading and writing and basic education. It was done only through the government and only through the Church of England at that time. But in 1780, after the Enabling Act, then they began to be able to meet privately and to conduct schools on a private basis. And he enlisted, along with Robert Stork, he enlisted children to come to these schools to learn to read and to write and to be better educated. They met in a place that was called Sooty Alley because it was so heavily populated by chimney sweeps, and it was in the kitchen of Miss Meredith. And her first students were just boys and girls off the street from ages 6 to 14 years of age. As you might imagine, those older boys and girls did not want to come. Not being accustomed to going to school, there were none in that day, they did not want to go where they had to behave themselves. And many of the parents actually tied heavy weights around them. They came to school shackled like a prisoner and with heavy blocks tied to their feet and their feet chained together in order just to make them sit down and behave and stay in one place long enough to listen to teaching. The primary aim of this school, they called it Sunday school simply because they met on Sunday, was literacy training, to teach them the alphabet, teach them to read and to write. In the process, they taught them to learn the Bible. The Bible was their text. They learned to read from the Bible. And the time frame for these first Sunday schools was from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now you know right off, that's not like our Sunday schools. It lasted all day. It was a very rigorous schedule for them to learn things they had never been taught. The first efforts at doing this was met with mixed success, as you might imagine. The children were very difficult to discipline. The first teachers quit. The first schools were abandoned. And then the children were shifted over to another school. In some cases, some of the children did know how to read and write, of course, from the groups of families that were more educated and wealthy, and they therefore could assist the teachers in tutoring the other younger students and teaching them these things. The Sunday school remained rather obscure for 2 or 3 years, but it was in 1783 that this editor wrote, Mr. Rakes, wrote to a magazine entitled The Gentleman's Magazine, 1783, and he mentioned his effort to teach children on Sundays. And it was because of that article that he wrote in 1783 that people began to look at it, to draw interest toward it, and wanted to know more about it. There were those who immediately, outwardly opposed it and rejected its idea, and among those were the Church of England and the British government. It was condemned for giving the laity and the poor too much control and authority. They were afraid that as you educated these poor, that they would lose their base for employment, and that it would threaten their jobs and their wealth, and therefore they were very much against it. But there were others who, seeing the benefit of it individually to all of these young boys and girls, began immediately to support it. One such man, well known in religious history, is John Wesley, because of his founding the Methodist movement that we're aware of. He saw this first being done in Europe, and as he came to America, some of the first Sunday schools were established in America under the Methodists by John Wesley. Another important supporter of it was William Fox, that we know of in the early establishment of the colonies of America. These Sunday schools grew rapidly over the next couple of decades, up until about 1811, when Rakes died. It was believed that they had as many as 400,000 people enrolled in Sunday schools throughout the land. It became a very important part of the education of children prior to public education. The Sunday School Society, therefore, was established. You'll remember that in this day and time, that even in regard to religious matters, when people wanted them promoted, almost always they would form a society of it. It would be just simply the organized effort to get it done. And some people would just get all hot on the collar because of that, because it was a society. They saw it as something standing in opposition or different from and against the church, and therefore they opposed it. Many of the first teachers, of course, were volunteers, but later they were paid. There was a Sunday school union that published materials for them to use in the teaching of the children. And among the first publications of the Sunday School Union was a little booklet entitled An Introduction to Reading. Schools like that in Europe also began in America, as we mentioned, by John Wesley coming here in Savannah, Georgia in 1737, one of the first Sunday schools established in this land. But of course, even along with the work in Europe and even before that in America of the work of Robert Raikes, Sunday schools were also being conducted here. As you remember the history of the Restoration movement, there were men like Alexander Campbell, particularly his father and mother, that everywhere they moved, and they did seem to move often in the pioneer days, that everywhere they went, because there were not public schools, they established a local school at their home, invited the neighborhood children there, taught them things that were very basic to just education, but also taught them the Scriptures, to learn to read the Bible and to understand it. But again, there were objections because of these societies. They thought the Sunday school was sapping strength away from the church and was opposing it. Also because they thought it came from Britain, because it was British, people immediately objected it just upon that basis. I want to remind you that at the beginning, the Sunday school effort was separate and apart from religious bodies. In fact, the Sunday School Society was not something controlled by churches. It wasn't controlled by some central organization of any denomination. And therefore, they were operating separately, simply as a matter of education, simply as a matter on Sundays to teach the young people who were not going to school. If you'll remember again the work of those in the Restoration movement, that right here in our area of Richmond, Virginia, Alexander Campbell gave eloquent argumentation for public school education. It was not a part of our American system at the time. And during his lifespan, during the decades of the 1730s, 40s, 50s, until his death in the 60s, that he began to promote public schools and public education. So we're talking about a time period before that event when children were left alone and were not being taught very much at all. Something very similar to that today is the effort of the World English School from Little Rock, Arkansas. And it's done by correspondence to students overseas who do not read English. And their introduction to the Bible and to learning the Bible, and we have teachers here in this audience who are part of that work, that you send out correspondence materials to people of the other nations who are learning English, and you help them in their understanding of English. In the process, they are learning that from the Bible and from Bible sentences, and therefore understand Scripture in the process. We also know that in the development of our history in the United States, that schools generally and higher education was sponsored by religious organizations. The first universities, like those of Harvard and Yale, William and Mary, Brown and Princeton, all had religious affiliations in the beginning and were established by various religious bodies. And then there's also the vacation Bible schools. They began somewhat in the area of 1890s, 1894 at Hopedale, Illinois, where a Methodist preacher's wife, Mrs. D.G. Miles, seeing that they needed further instruction during the long months of summer, wanted to have a more lengthy school, not just one day a week, but during several days in a row and through entire weeks, they would have the vacation Bible schools. Students were expected to pay for it. They paid $1 for enrollment, and they were expected to bring a Bible. If they did not have one, the American Bible Society provided them one. By the anniversary of this Vacation Bible School in 1951, it was believed that over 62,000 churches throughout our land had more than 5 million students enrolled in Vacation Bible School. Now that's just a brief history to let us know where we are, that it was relatively new, has not always been a part of the church or the work of the church. And so in view of that, in view of its beginning being different than what it is today, where we do not teach reading and writing and math and those types of courses, we teach primarily the Bible. We want to see where we are today and to make an argument for its continued promotion. You may remember in the history of the church over the last century and even beyond that strong objections have been made repeatedly against Bible classes, simple Bible classes like we have at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning and Wednesday nights and vacation Bible schools and Bible bowls like we have. Some objected to them for reasons we've already given earlier. Some said that it was British and therefore Americans don't like British things. Therefore it won't have anything to do with it. Another one was that it was something to draw people away from the church. People saw it as being separate from the church, and in the beginning it was. They would often raise funds within a Sunday school setting. Collections were gathered there, and then a general collection during the church hour. And people saw all sorts of difficulties here and opposed them for their various reasons that they had. Some actually say that the Bible denies us the right to have divided Bible classes. That it is actually sinful and wrong for you to divide up a church and to go into various classrooms with different age groups and therefore teach the Bible. I do not believe that any such arguments against the Bible classes are valid. I do not support any of those. I think they're misguided and wrong, and that there is no valid argument that can be given against the way in which modern Bible classes are conducted. I have before me something that just reminds us of that time period. It's a lengthy article arguing against Sunday schools. In fact, this fellow wrote a poem. And to sit down and take such a time to write a poem that would have this as its message. And then the author of the poem says, notice how the letters line up on the left-hand side. And when you do so, it's bold on this sheet so you can't miss it. In the vertical, just first letters of each line, as you read down the stanzas of it, it says, Sunday school fruits, Satan's weapon. And it went so far as to say that they were ungodly and the fruits were unchristlike. I'd like to read you a few of these lines just to help you be filled with dismay. It says, Sunday school is like a tree under which men like to be, never doubting what is taught, division is by Satan brought. All trees are known by fruits they bear. You see, my friend, what kind is here? Such fruits, won't you stop and think, cannot please God, but soon must sink. How deep, my friends, no one can tell. One thing we know, there's a place called hell, and old Satan is the captain there. Look out for trees, by fruits they bear. Can you imagine someone writing something like that and saying that the fruits of Sunday school are such that they're sinking and going so low that we know there's a place called hell? And that therefore you'll be lost if you participate in something like Bible classes and in Sunday school. I do not have any inkling of a support for such an idea as that. I realize that there are those who have argued against it, but I want today to argue in support of it. And here are my reasons. Number one, it is obvious upon attending any such class on Sunday morning at any age level, or on Wednesday night, or vacation Bible school, or Bible bowl, that there is one thing being done, and one thing only. And that is that we are studying the Bible. We are learning about God. How in the world can we make an opposition, an argument in opposing that? How is that the fruit of Satan? And how will that lead to hell? We are all to be learning the Bible. Jesus said, go into all the world and teach every nation. Matthew 28. Teach every creature. Mark chapter 16. The law of Moses taught parents to teach their children. And this is what the law said in Deuteronomy 6. These words I command you this day shall be in your heart. And you shall teach them diligently unto your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You'll bind them for a sign upon your forehead, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and they shall write them upon posts of thine house and upon thy gates. And so here are the commandments of the Bible to teach the Bible. The New Testament of the book of Titus and also in Timothy teaches that the older men and women are to teach the younger. And so there are various ways, of course, in which we can do that. This is one way to do it. It is a very productive and effective way to do it, and we all ought to be supporting it. Secondly, I would argue that it is valuable in that it leads us and gives us an opportunity to teach those who do not know Christ, who are not Christians. That in Vacation Bible School we have children in the community that are invited here, many of which do not attend churches anywhere. And they are not known, they do not know and have not been taught how to live, how to behave morally, what to do to become a Christian. And in these Vacation Bible Schools we seek to teach them the way of Christ and how they ought to live. My third argument would be that it is great for our families, that it supports and builds up the family, where a husband and wife and children all participate. It's not where we send our children, but it's where we also are, and they see us interested in the Bible. Last Sunday I gave an argument in saying that we all ought to participate in as many of the activities of the church as possible, because in just one way, we might think, it may very well be possible by your participation you might save your marriage. Now, I wouldn't stop there. But you think how wonderful it would be if that alone were to be such fruit of our Bible study time together. It may be that a husband in an audience or in a Bible class, studying in a men's class, or these teenagers that they're studying and they're taught how they ought to live morally, that they are to abstain from fornication and adultery, that they are to love their wives, wives are to love their husbands and their children, how that the family should be together and husband and wife become one flesh, and they're not to put one another away. They learn those truths there, and it'll hold you together as a family. How in the world can we argue against that? Furthermore, it may very well save your life. Someone just this past week was describing someone in their family who has become ill and weakened in their health because they have not lived as a Christian, and that their health is quickly deteriorating and being destroyed. They have tremendous health problems, many of which would have been solved simply by living the way of Christ, by abstaining from sinful things and wrong things that destroy your body. And so it may very well save your life. Furthermore, and most importantly, it'll save your soul. It takes us a long time to grow spiritually. We learn a little here and a little there. Maybe in a Bible class you're studying about the journeys of the nation of Israel coming from Egypt and going toward Palestine. You wonder, what in the world does all of this have to do with Christian living? And you might be involved in historical aspects of the prophets of Israel, or that of the New Testament of Christ dealing with the Jews of His day, or the destruction of Jerusalem, or the fall of Rome in the book of Revelation. And all of this may seem so academic in the beginning, and yet, little by little and step by step, it all falls into place. Someone said to me recently, it's like a light coming on in a room. The rooms of the house are dark, and you enter it, and you flip the switch, and lights come on. One of the wonders of teaching is to watch that happen. It is a labor. It is a work, a diligent work. It takes a great deal of persistence and energy and sweat. And yet the beauty of it, the wonder of it, what we wait to see is for the lights to come on. And they do. You can't teach the Word of God without light coming on. That's what it is. And so it dispels darkness, and we understand. We see something we've never seen before. Someone said just recently that over the past weeks and months that they have had a grasp and a view of Christianity that they've not seen before, not had before. It is something that develops over time. You mature and you grow, and there it is for you. It blesses you that way. The late brother Ira North told about Judge Sam Davis Tatum, a juvenile judge in Tennessee who kept records of children who appeared before him. And this is what the judge said. He said that children who were a part of Bible classes of Sunday school are seldom in trouble with the law. And children who have been brought up in a church where parents participated, who were there, who studied in their classes, and who showed an interest in the Bible, they almost never end up in trouble. This is what a juvenile judge said. We don't need his words. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. I would say this, in urging your support for all of the various activities to learn the Bible, to learn the will and the way of God, that we will all admit that it's not absolutely essential that we have Bible classes on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. There's no such verse in the Bible that says, "Thou shalt." But I'd like to hear any argument made against it. There is no verse in the Bible that says that thou shalt meet on Wednesday night and have an hour for Bible study. Again, I'd like to hear any argument you have against it. Or against Vacation Bible School or Bible Bowls. There is not a valid argument that can be made against these activities. There are other ways to do it. Some may say, I want to stay home. Let me ask you this. If the elders were to decide we're going to do this a different way, and they very easily could, we're going to do these Bible studies another way, some other fashion, some other method, at some other place. Here's my question. Would you participate? Would you be there? It's just Bible study. No matter where it is, no matter how it's organized, no matter how many's there, still the same thing. It's Bible study. Would you participate in it? Or would you refrain from it? In conclusion, my people, Hosea said, are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected my word, I will also reject you. If you reject the knowledge of God, according to Romans 1 and Hosea, you're rejecting God. If you reject God, He will also reject you. There are two levels of learning. One is just the factual level. You learn things, just elementary, the building blocks for the greater picture. You just learn those. And then the higher one, the deeper one, is the meaning. What does it mean? How does it apply to my life? That's what's important. That's what we have to keep on at until we reach that point. There's a great danger here. And the danger is that there are many people, even involved in religion, that want to keep a comfortable distance from participation. There are people who want to they want to get close enough to hear it, to listen to it. They don't want to get too involved in it. And all of us have the power within our own hearts to put the foot on the brake or on the accelerator. We're the ones who determine how much we will be involved. And I want to urge you, I want to plead with you for your own well-being, individually, for your families, for the good of the church. I want to plead with you to be involved in all of these activities. And worship on Sunday morning, Bible classes, as many as often. Be a part of them. Grow. Understand. See what's going on there. Don't be ashamed of it. Be involved. Is it because we're not sure about the truthfulness of Christianity? If that's it, then say so. Let's find out what the problem is, and let's know what it is that we're after. If we're after the world, then go for it. But if we're after a knowledge of God and understanding His will, and we want to go to heaven, then let's be serious about it. One of the most important things I believe you'll ever do, no matter what your age, you're a young person in elementary school, junior high, high school, is to attend every Bible class that's offered. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. One of the most important things you'll do when you go to college is be a part of the local church and attend every Bible class. I was there. I know how difficult it is. When I went to engineering school, I was wondering, how am I going to take tests on Thursday and go to that Wednesday night Bible class? But I can tell you it can be done. In many cases, we'll waste more time at home watching TV and just talking and piddling around. We'll waste more time than the other folks spend in getting dressed and attending that hour and coming back home. It's a matter of priority. It's a matter of what you do and what you want to do. In our churches, we have many who do not object to Sunday schools. The problem is they just simply don't attend. Sometimes only about 50% of our membership. Last Sunday, I asked the church to do something. I asked us all if we would simply put forth that effort to be a part of all of the assemblies. It would change us immediately. I don't expect the church to be helped by folks who are not part of it. It has to be done from within. If we're going to be a better church, a strong church, it has to be that we'll depend upon you and you depend upon me. Can we depend upon you? Will you change habits, traditions, whatever your customs have been? Will you change those? And show interest and love and devotion to the cause of Christ. That's all we're asking. I believe that is demanded of us through our discipleship of Jesus Christ. It's that level of maturity and commitment that we invite today and exhort in our invitation song. To show faith in Christ, to confess Him as the Lord of all, that He's the head of this body of the church that we are devoted to, and therefore because of Him we are devoted to the church. We invite you to come, repenting of sins, having your sins forgiven through baptism into Christ, through the blood of Christ, while we stand and sing together.
Just as I am.